So no matter what you're working in, some of these also have a, they'll have templates for even other programs. Notice it's kind of interesting though, they've got Premiere Pro, they've got DaVinci Resolve, they've got Final Cut Pro, but they don't have Media Composer from Avid, which I thought was kind of interesting, which, as we've talked about, Media Composer for Avid is the Hollywood choice, it's the more professional choice, and I'm sure there's templates out there for that too, but it's kind of interesting that they're not included. So anyway, you can just click on the link up here for Premiere Pro and drop it down, and here are all these pre-designed graphics that you can customize and just drop right in. So if we're looking at titles, which is what we're going to be talking about today, here's all sorts of, again, and I'll just click on one and bring it up and see what it is. You can preview them here. And it's even got music.
Preview.
This is a title sequence. And it has pre-designed graphics. It's got the background, it's got the font, it's got the colors all worked out. So again, that's for weddings, if you're doing a wedding thing. And some of these, again, what you probably want to do is take those and kind of customize them for yourself. And some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But it's got all these things in here that are already created, which is kind of nice. The other thing I wanted to talk about, we're going to use a terminology, or a term called lower thirds. And I don't know, it's also got transitions in here, it's got logos, it's got slideshows. So if you want to do a custom slideshow, you can pick one of these slideshows and just drop in your own graphics and create it. But in titles, there's a term called lower thirds, and here it is right here. And we're going to use that term today. And lower thirds is nothing more than putting usually it's a title, it's the person's name, and it's a title, and they call it lower thirds because generally it goes in the lower third section of the video. And it can animate. This one might animate. We can hit play on this and see if it animates. But you can see it's got a little animation thing. So typically a lower third, and we're going to be creating that today, and we're also going to be creating it. You'll have a project today that you work on for titling. It usually comes up, it lasts about 7 to 10 seconds. It just identifies the person's name and their title, and you just drop it in. You see this every night on the news or CNN or wherever. They always put this in. So if you hear that term, lower thirds, that's what it's called. Now you can move, it doesn't have to stay in the lower third, that's just typically where it's placed. But you can place it anywhere. Some file that's created, they're usually created in After Effects. You can create them in Premiere, but After Effects gives you a lot more control over it. But it's created there, and it is a file that creates all these things in one file, and then you just drop it into Premiere. So it's kind of nice. And when we put it in the Essential panel, as we'll see today, it'll give you a prompt. It'll give you a prompt for the name. It'll give you a prompt for the title. It'll give you a prompt for colors. So you can go in and just pick and choose and customize everything. Later in the we may get, I don't know if we're going to have time to get to it, we may talk, it's more of an advanced feature to actually create class. We're not going to get into that today, it's kind of advanced. And again, to do it properly, a lot of people go into After Effects and create it. But anyway, that's modern thirds. Premiere, and for the class today, you guys are I'd like you to follow along and work on it. If you have access to your computer, we're using the same files as last week. So if you've still got that folder on your computer, you can just use that. If you don't, I've got the discs here if you want to download. Put the files on and follow along. Oh yeah. It's just a folder in there and it says Premiere Pro Resources. It has the same files we've been using the whole time, so no surprise there. One other thing before we get started, I'd also like to, let me show a couple of so the travel video was done today, and about half of you have turned it in by this point, and everybody did a really good job on this. I want to show a couple of these because I really liked them. But you know, I bring through these Brad, John, Raul, Hunter. You had some good ones, but I want to take a look at JD here.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Let's show you. A lot of you guys came up with a lot of, they look very similar, and you find a way to tell a story, and I think James is pretty typical, so I just wanted to show this to you. So let's watch it and take a look. You see something new, so I'm gonna assume that Jay really planned that out. You know? But look at it one more time. So I just thought that was really cool. The shot going upside down, you know, we do a transition, we pick up the roller coaster upside down and bring it back. So just kind of a neat shot. So nice job. But you all, everyone did a really nice job on these. All of them I looked at so far did really good. So you know, appreciate the hard work on that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up the project that's on the desktop here, which is the one we were working in last week, which is in this Premiere Pro course resources. It's this Class 6 project. I'm just going to go ahead and open that up again. That will give me access to all these files from last week, and I'm going to close down this sequence and just create a new sequence. And again, the easiest way to create a new sequence, as we know, is just to pick a file and drop it in there. So I'm, let me see, it's, you know, we're still working on this project, this bread project. So I'm just going to pick that, drop it in. Don't want the audio, so I will delink that and let go. And I just got, you know, some shot of bread here. Okay, So before we get started, a couple of things, and we've talked about these before. There's a couple of things in Premiere Pro that are going to help you with your titling. And if for those of you that, yeah, sure. Those of you who came in late, again, we're doing titling and graphics today, and we talked about you're going to have to wear a lot of hats when you're an editor. You're going to have to know a little bit about audio, a little bit of storytelling. You're obviously going to have to know the software, and you're going to have to know a little bit about graphic arts and what makes a good title, what makes a good. This is really important for things, especially when you're branding corporations, what they call branding, or you can brand an individual. If you're doing work for a corporation, they use consistent branding across everything they do. So they're going to have to use the same fonts. They're going to use the same colors. They're going to have rules for how you use the fonts, how you place them. You know, sometimes you may want to create you can use their fonts, and maybe you want to do an italic, but they don't allow italics. So you have to be aware of these, and you have to use them, you know, judiciously. Now, the nice thing is, sometimes a client won't even give you colors or fonts or anything, and they'll just say, oh, do what you want to do. And that's sometimes the hardest thing, because you've got to come up with a look, and that takes time, right? It takes a lot of time, sometimes a couple, you know, hours to come up with this work, and then you show it to them, and they say, oh, no, that's not what I want. That's not even close to what I want. And you're like, well, you didn't tell me what you want, you know? But you know, so if they give you the colors, I like it when people give me the colors and give me at least a starting point. And obviously you can create something, you know, dummy something up in a short amount of time, half an hour, 45 minutes, send it over to them and say, am I in the right direction, you know? You know, it's a frustrating thing, and it's very frustrating with graphics. And if you're not a graphic artist, and let me tell you, if you are a graphic artist, and you've taken a graphic arts course and got all A's, and your professors told you, man, you're a really good graphic artist, you can make a lot of money in this business, okay? Because really good graphic artists are hard to find. And if you do find one, when I find them, they always disappear in about 6 months because they get hired up by somebody else, because there's not a whole lot of good graphic artists out there. So if you are a talented graphic artist, you can make some money in this business and have a nice career. So anyway, we've talked about a couple of things, boundaries that we've got there. Exactly. Again, I've explained this to you before about what title safe is. You've got one line that goes 90%, which is called the action safe area. You've got another one that goes 80%, covers 80% of the screen. That's title safe area. What we want to try and do is keep all of our titles in this 80% title safe area right here. That used to be more important in the past because monitors were very unreliable, and sometimes they would underscan or overscan, and they would cut off a section of the video. And that's why action safe, you would keep all your action within that, and then title safe, just to be safe, you put them in there just so they wouldn't run off the edge of the screen. Now with contemporary monitors, we usually don't have nearly as much problem with that, but it's still a good idea. If you see titles going right up to the edge on somebody's work, you know they're an amateur. You know that they're not really good at doing this. Take your cursor, grab the side. Let me go back in and turn on rulers. I think rulers need to be on guides. So if I come over here and I just grab that ruler and I slide it across, I've got a guide right there. So if I want to put a guide, you know, 50% right in the middle, and you can do the same thing from the top. You can pull it down. I can put that guide. Again, I'm using that safe margin you can see over here. And now I've got a guide that tells me where, you know, the middle of the screen is. So that's nice. And you can turn those on or off. The other thing you can do is snap in program monitor. And when we do that, I'll actually have to, let me come back to that because I'll have to create a graphic to do that. But Snap in Program Monitor, if I've got guides created, then I can snap right to them. So if I've got a bunch of graphics, I could create, maybe I want to create it on the side here. I want to line all these graphics up. I could create them all, and then I could snap them right to this line. So again, that's another nice little tool that you've got here. And you can go in and put these on keyboard preferences if you want to. So for today, when we create graphics in Premiere Pro, we use something called the Essential Graphics panel. And you know, they used to have the graphics, and I'll have to look this up because I was looking at this last night. There used to be a graphics workspace in here. Now they've got this captions and graphics, but it doesn't bring up the Essential Graphics panel, so I'm not sure what's happening there. But all you have to do, instead of bringing up the workspaces, obviously you go down here. Last week we did Essential Sound panel. So this week we're going to bring up Essential Graphics panel. And there it is, it comes up on the side. And again, it's kind of crowded for one monitor. This is why you like to have more than one monitor when you edit. But that's basically it right here. Now the nice thing, this is new. Well, it's been out for 3 or 4 years, but it's fairly new. They used to have an old titling system. It's a legacy system, and I think it might even be in here. Let's see, if you went to File, New, there it is, Legacy Title. So it's got an old character generator that's built into here, but you know, nobody uses it much anymore. But you may see from time to time a title that's not created in Essential Graphics, and it's sitting in there, and you're thinking, where the heck did this come from? It might be one of those legacy titles. But we're not going to worry about this. This is brand new. The main change they've made in this is that you've got layers in this, that you can create layers in your title, just like you can in Photoshop. Anybody familiar with Photoshop or work in Photoshop? All right, the basis of Photoshop is creating layers. And manipulating those layers and moving one on top of the other, and creating all sorts of effects. Well, you can do that. This doesn't have the same power as Photoshop, obviously, but we can create that in here. Hey. And the other thing, so it's got layers, which the old system didn't have. The other thing is what I talked about are these MOGRT files, and we'll take a look at one of those right now. Just like we had on our Essential Audio panel, you've got the Browse window and you've got the Edit window. So if I'm in the Browse window, notice I've got a bunch of files here already in here. Now my computer's a little different. I've added some other MOGRT files to this, so I've probably got more than you've got. But these are all pre-created files, and I'll just pick one out and put it on. And all you have to do is pick this out and drag it to the timeline, and again, it creates, let's zoom in on this a little bit, and we'll put it up here. It has already pre-created a lower third. You can see that up there. It's got a little animation on the front. Go to the end of it, it'll have a little animation to take it out. And then over here, you can go in and change, the colors and the text and everything. So that's basically what a MOGRT file is. It's been pre-created. It has some limitations sometimes, and you'll notice on this one, which drives me crazy, they create these things, but they give you a custom font. You can't change that font. Unless you take it back into Adobe After Effects. Then you can go in and take it apart and change the font. This just gives you an option. Let me bring the file up here. This gives you an option to change the name on both the person's name and their title. And you can change the colors, and you can scale it up or down. But that's about it. You can't change the font without taking it into After Effects or doing a lot of work. So just be aware if you're using these MOGRT files, sometimes you will have limitations with them. Or, like I said, if you take it into After Effects, you can do some work. But anyway, Premiere gives you some basic ones. You can go in and download others and put it in this column and have it available to you. And then once you have it, you can just drop and drag. And then, you know, here's, again, a title that has a little bit of animation with it. So, anyway, you do have some of these pre-created. You can add them to it. We may get into actually how you create these later in the...
Can I ask you a question, Professor?
Yeah.
How do you get that frame box in the program video? Did I miss that, or is that something?
The title safe?
Yeah, the two squares.
The safe margin?
Yes.
Yeah. It's this little wrench here. Just click on the wrench and go down to safe margins.
Safe margins.
That's how you turn it on. I'm going to pull this out so I've got a little bit more real estate here. Okay, so what we're going to do today, that's the browse function. But what we're going to do today is go over here to the edit function, because we're going to create a title from scratch and put it into our video. We will have a project due today, or not due today. It's assigned today. It will be due in like a week and a half. And it will be on titles and created titles. So when you create these titles, you're going to be created in this way. In fact, I want to go real quick. It's one of the things I was going to do earlier before we got into this. Let me go to this real quick. I just want to go to the module real quick and just make sure everybody is on schedule with these things. This is going to be, this doesn't open up until this afternoon. But for this week, we're going to have an assignment down here, which is video assignment on titling. I'll explain that all at the end of class. One other thing I wanted to explain to you is that I found some additional computers around campus, and I put them in here. So this computer lab is available at these times, and we know sometimes you show up in computer lab and not the library, which I think John told me about. I didn't even know about this till last week. So upstairs, second floor in the library. Here's the hours. Same over at PCC. If you're working over there, they've got some Mac computers over there. That's the room. I've never been there. I don't know where that is, but it's LL122. So if you do need access to other computers, obviously bring headphones. You can't turn the volume up on any of those. So bring headphones, and you should be able, anytime you're on campus here, you should be able to find a computer that you can work on. The other thing I put in here, again, we're going to download the project files for this week. I've got to download the assignment. I've put in here 2 additional things I wanted to tell you about. I've got some additional tutorials, since I know some of you have been asking if you missed the class or you want to review what we've gone over. I've put in a couple of tutorials here that are usually fairly good tutorials on the Essential Graphics panel. This first one, done by this person called Premiere Dal, she goes into more MOGRT files in a lot of detail. So if you want a little bit more detail on it, she also goes over the essential panels. You can watch that. This guy is just a real good basic, tutorial. This covers a lot of Premiere, a lot of the functions. So if you missed the audio last week and you want to catch up on that, you can use that. But on the essential panels, you have to go to a time 1:12:25, and you'll see it on the timeline, and you can review the Essential Graphics panel with him. There's also another thing in here. There's an article I came across this week in this trade magazine called Video Maker, and I spelled the word video wrong there, sorry. It's not VidMaker. But if you want to go in on this, they have an article this week on every Adobe Premiere Pro native effect you should know. And it goes through all the different effects in Premiere Pro and kind of gives you an introduction to them and tells more about them in detail. So anyway, I put that in there just if you want to go through those. We'll go over the actual project later, but okay, so we're going to create a new title in Premiere. And when you come into this thing, it always got me. When you come into this Essential Graphics panel, it just looks like a blank page. And you could miss how to start in here. And how to start in here is just this little square up here in the corner. So if you're following along, you want to follow along, all you do is click on that. And you're going to get 4 or 5 options here. You've got an option to create a new text file. You've got an option for vertical text. That's if you want to write, text vertically. You've got an option to add some objects, a rectangle, ellipse, a polygon. And then you've got the final option, which is you can bring in another file, another graphic file, a logo or something, and add it to your title. So those are the options you've got when you come in here. Usually what you're going to do is just click on text, and that's what I'm going to do here. Now, when I click on this, let me make sure I got the effects panel up, I got the timeline up, got the program up. When I click on this, watch all the different areas. Watch all the different areas of Premiere that are going to be populated. You're going to get an effects panel, you're going to get something on the timeline, and you're going to get something in the Essential Graphics panel. When I click a new text layer, boom. So over here, I've got motion controls, which we won't talk about right now. We'll talk about that later. Here, I've got the actual text that's been placed onto the timeline, and of course they placed it right where the playhead was located, and they placed it whatever track I've got selected here. And then the Essential Graphics panel now populates with all these controls for controlling your text. So and I'm going to pull this up again, when this text comes in, it doesn't have a background with it. It'll just drop in over whatever you've got on your video. One thing to know about the graphics in this, in Premiere, let me put this back over black, it's a little easier to see. These are vector graphics. And I don't know if you know the difference between vector or bitmap. A bitmap graphic, if you pull it in some fonts, some programs will pull in, as you scale them up, they tend to degrade. They don't look too good. Just like video, if you scale video up, it doesn't look too good. With these vector files, you don't have that problem. You can scale this up as much as you want to go, and it's going to hold its resolution. It's going to look good. It's true in a lot of programs. So if I have this on here, notice I've got a box around it. I can just click and drag that and put that box, wherever I want to. Now notice over here on the right-hand side, this is the position of the text. So as I move that, it's tracking that over here. And obviously I can come over here and just click, I can click on there and put in a number, but I can hover over it, get this left, right, and I can, move that on the XY axis. If I have numbers, if I move my first text down here, lower third, and I've got an exact number here, obviously I can copy paste those numbers to get something in the exact same placement. So it's very easy to move it around. I can scale it. I can just grab the corner and scale. And again, no matter how big I go with this, and I'll go full screen with this, I'm not losing any resolution. You can tell with a bitmap font or a bitmap program, you're going to get a lot of jaggings on the edge, and I'm not getting that on that. So you can blow these fonts up really nice and big and not have any problem with that. And again, you've got the scale. These are really small, sometimes hard to see. Here's your scale right here. So again, if you can just hover over that, or you can put in an exact scale. You've got your, this is your opacity setting right here. You've got your styles. I'm going to come back to styles. We'll skip over that for right now. This is your font style. And I assume that most of you know kind of a little bit about working with fonts if you work with, you know, Microsoft Word or anything. Obviously, you can change this. It typically defaults to the last font you used, but you can change this to whatever you want to. I'm just going to go ahead and go in and change it to an Arial font. And then your style of font is right here. So, you know, you've got italic, you've got bold italic. Not all fonts will have this. Will have a version of an italic or a bold italic. So in that case, if you've just got a font and it's just got a regular, you can come down here to this line down here, and these are just what we call faux font adjustments. So you can add an italic, and that's just the program adding it. You know, all caps, caps lowercase, subscripts, and underlines, you know, so you've got a lot of things you can do down there to add to that font. Now, to type something into the font, also notice up here, this is your layers up here. If we were to add, as we add more fonts to it, we're going to add layers up here in this portion. And again, whatever layer's on top, that takes precedence. Anything that's underneath it, that's grouped underneath it, and you can change that order as you go through. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, obviously just come in here and type something in. And the easy way to do that, we've got a T down here, which is our text indicator, our type text tool. And if I click on that, this turns red, and now I can go in here and I'm just gonna, you know, we're working on this sourdough bread video, so I'm just gonna type a title in there called sourdough bread. So as long as I've got this little T indicator, I can go in and manipulate this text, go back to the selection tool, then it turns that off, and then I can just move it around, and I don't have to worry about messing up the text. So, does that make sense? Very, very simple, very straightforward. So we've gone through the files. I just want to track and make sure I've gotten all the things here. The next thing I'm going to go through here is, let's go through this alignment and transform window. You've got a lot of tools here for centering the text. Again, you just have to kind of go through and click on them. So this is vertical center. That'll position the text right in the middle. If you're off horizontally, you've got horizontal center right there. You can click on this and pin your text to the top. You can pin it to the middle. You can pin it to the bottom. Go left side, middle, right side. So you've got a lot of tools there for positioning your text. Obviously, here's your motion that I've already showed you, so you can use that to position your text. This is your anchor point. I'm not going to get into that a whole lot, but basically we've talked a little bit about anchor points. Anchor points, and if I light this up, anchor points, and usually on text, you can see it's that little indicator down there. And if you are going to, let's say you're going to rotate the text, that's the point around which the text is going to rotate. And obviously, that's not actually correct. Let me go back. reset. Okay. Let me, I'm not sure, something's going wrong now. So if you want to remove text, all I have to do is come up here at the top, click on it, and hit remove. And I'm gonna add this again. I'm gonna come back in here with my layer. Select T, I'm gonna type this up again. I'm going to position it. Now, typically your anchor point is in, like I said, anchor point is typically in the lower left-hand corner. Let's see if we get a rotate now on this. Okay, so the anchor point on this, typically on the, I thought they were in the middle, but this is actually right in the center. So the anchor point now is set in the center. Anyway, we can use that to change the anchor point. And again, if you need to correct something, if you've spelled it wrong, just click in there and do that. Go back to the selection tool, and we're back here. So that's your anchor point. Going on down here, you've got your opacity on this. So if you want to, again, create opacity on that, you've got it there. Going down to this next section now, we've talked about the, changing the font, talked about the font tools. You've also got, for paragraphs, you've got these paragraph tools here, and it's kind of hard to see this without putting some more words in here. So what I'm going to do is just create, add some words there, and if we come down here to the paragraph, we can now center this whole thing using those functions. We can center it, and then we can, again, horizontally center it left and right. We can align it on the left side. We can align it on the right side. Notice when you do that, it kind of shifts that around, but then you can grab it and move it to wherever you want. So you've got right alignment, center alignment, left alignment. Again, I'll just grab that and move that back here. And that's for typically if you've got a lot of text, paragraphs. So I'll get rid of that. Moving on down, I've showed you kind of these faux fonts. Actually, let's go back to the paragraph because that will help me on this next section. Because we're talking about, you've also got these tools for spacing. So on this one, you're just going to be spacing out the letters. So if you want to stretch your letters, you can use that tool. Again, I think the preset is just back to 0. If you want to stretch the spacing between the lines, you can use this tool here. And I think this is baseline. So on this tool, it just creates whatever your baseline is and shifts off of that. So again, another way just to control the text. And finally, getting back down here to the bottom, we've got even more controls. And again, let me get rid of this. I'm just going to go back to my basic sourdough bread. And I'm going to click on this. And down here we've got all your color controls and other attributes for the appearance of the text. So if I want to change the text color, obviously I'll just click on this fill. I can select another color and boom, right away I get that. Another nice thing is it's got a color picker here. There's one here and there's also one over here. So if I want to match something in my screen, I can click on that. Let's say I want to make this the same color as that bread dough. I can click on that and that'll select that color. Again, we may not want to do that here, but you've got that option. And again, if you want to come back and just change it back to white, we go back to white. Notice too, it sometimes helps, especially on ability is always a big thing, and sometimes it's nice to have, you know, for readability, to use the bold on that. Now I'm going to keep the text over my video and show you a few other things. You've got something called stroke, and stroke is nothing more than an outline of the text. So if I click that on, you can't really see it now because it's the same color as the fill. So I can click that on, add a color, let's make it black. That's easy, more easier to see. And then I can come over and hover over this little number here and pull that up, and that will, you know, adjust that. If I want to put it like an outline around the text, you can do that. Sometimes that's necessary, it helps for readability. You can add a background to the text. And again, if I want to change the color, let's say now I want to make the color that red color. There I've got a brown background color behind my text. And I've got all sorts of controls on the background. I've got opacity here. You can make it, you know, completely transparent or completely opaque. I've got size, dimension here, and I've got something down here that's just been added new, and I was playing around with this and I don't know what it is yet, so I'm not even going to show it to you. But anyway, the main things you've got here are opacity and size on that. And again, if you want to click it on or off, you just click that button and you can turn it on and it's going to remember all the settings. Last thing down here is you've got a drop shadow. So if I click that on, again, I've got a lot of controls here in my drop shadow. I can take the distance of the drop shadow off of the original type. I can make the drop shadow bigger or smaller. And this is basically the blur on the drop shadow, which is nice to have. Because when you put that drop shadow up there, sometimes it's nice. If I create a real hard edge on this drop shadow, let me do this, and bring the opacity up. That looks kind of what I would call kind of a video look. It's it's kind of a dated look, and you never know, these things might come around. But you know, it does give you readability, and it gives you kind of a nice, you know, look to it. But in a lot of ways, that's kind of dated right now. But if you just add a little bit of softness to that, take the opacity down, soften those edges, maybe bring it in a little bit. Let's bring the distance in a little. So you just got a little bit of a look to it there. I don't know, sometimes I think that's a little better looking. It still gives you a little pop. I mean, what the drop shadow is doing is trying to give you a little bit of a three-dimensional look to get your text to pop off the background. So you can kind of play around with that. I would probably on this, I'm still got too much distance there, and maybe take the softness down a little bit. But having a little bit of that just, you know, makes it pop off there and gives you a little bit more punch. There is a thing down here called mask with text. I'm not going to do that. That's more of an advanced feature right now. But basically, that's all that's happening here as far as creating the text. This styles thing, once you get this all created and you've got a particular style that you want to reuse for maybe a lot of different projects or you want to reuse later, you can go in here and create your own style and name that style and save it. So that's basically what's going on there. And then anytime you come back into the program, it'll come up as a default here and you can just recreate that and come back to it. So that's nice to, if you create something that you want to reuse a lot, that's a good thing to have there. Other than that, that's really, I'm not going to go through this Pin2 video frame either right now. That's basically it about creating text. Anybody have any questions on any of that stuff? It's fairly straightforward. It's fairly easy. The next thing I'm going to talk about then, like I said, we've got layers here that we can create. So we can create more layers without having to create another text file. Now obviously, if you want to copy and paste this text, once you get something created, it's very simple. Just click on it, copy it, paste it, and you've got it created. Maybe you want to create, you want to keep the same title, just create it 5 or 6 times and then change the word in each one. It's very easy to copy and paste these. When you create this title, you put a new name in it. Again, and it has all the same attributes up here. You can go in and change them. But a lot of times what you want to do is we want to create multiple titles, but we all want to keep it in that one little file. We don't want to create 3 or 4 files. Again, you're welcome to. You can create 3 or 4 files and stack them up on the timeline, but you can also layer it just within this file. And again, all you have to do is come up here, create a new text file, and so I'll come in here, and let's say I'm just going to add 101 as a title for that. And once I get it created, I can come in here. Again, I can drag this out. I can put these wherever I want to. I can go in here and, maybe I want to change the font on this, do something different with it. So I can come in here. Let's just go find like a Helvetica or something. Or maybe I'll just make it Arial black, so it's just a little bit more bolder. And I can position that, and now I've got two texts created, but they're all within one file. And if I click outside this area, notice when I do that, I now have even more transform features. And again, all I did, if I click on the actual text file, it's going to bring up all the features for that, and it identifies which one it is. So this is sourdough bread. This is 101. I can go in and manipulate that. But if I click outside that area, now I have transform effects for moving both of them together. So now they move as one. So that's kind of nice. So you've got the transform effect to go vertical, horizontal, or I can just, actually I can't grab it. I thought I could grab the whole thing, but you can't. So when you're using this transform for the entire thing, you click outside that, and then you can use this box to manipulate it. And again, you've got opacity and rotation. You've got all these things that you can work on as kind of a global setting that affects the whole thing. So, does that make sense? And all you have to do is click on each individual one to go back and get on, to select each individual one. Now the other thing, we've got other options. I'm not going to do vertical text. If you want to mess around with that, you can do it. But we've got objects we can add. We've got a rectangle, ellipse, and a polygon. So I'm just going to select this and put a simple rectangle in there. And again, I can pull this out, size this. I've got all my align and transform here. And I've got my same fill options down here. So if I want to go in here, I don't know, whatever, you want to make it blue. You can select blue, and you've got that. Now, I can come up here to the layering. Again, this is a really cool thing, and I can change the layering on this and move that to the bottom. So again, that's one of the nice, powerful things that's in this effects panel. And once I do that, then let's say I want to create a box that goes around this sourdough bread. I can do that. Maybe I want to come in here and give it a little opacity. Or maybe I want to change it to the color of that bread. Again, I can use this picker here or this picker over here. I can go in there and select the color of bread, and now it kind of matches with the picture a little bit better. Another nice thing, you've got this hex code, what they call a hex code down here. Some companies will have specific hex codes for their colors. So if you have that hex code, you just enter that number in there, and boom, you've got their color automatically, which is really nice. Then you know, sometimes if you're using the color picker or something like that, you might not have the exact same color, so you can use that to go in and choose the color. Obviously, you can also use all these sliders in here, your RGB sliders. You can change your RGB, or if you know what the RGB number is for your color, you can just go in here and manually enter the RGB and come up with the color that you need. Again, I'm just going to change it back to this brown color. And again, now if I do the same thing, if I click outside that, now I can transform. Nice. But if I want to click on those things individually, I can go in and do that. All right, any questions on any of that so far? I just want to go over, make sure, I just want to go down the list here, make sure I haven't left anything out. It's pretty much everything, styles, master control. Oh, the logo import, okay. Besides objects, you've also got, you can import a file and put it on here. So let me take this, I'm gonna take the whole thing and I'll center it up here. Now let's say I want to add a logo to this. Very simple to do. Come in here, select from file. Now on my desktop, I don't have a logo for this company. I've got a Nike logo on my desktop. So I'm going to throw the Nike logo in the bread dough, which, bread video, which you'd never do. But I'm going to go ahead and click on this Nike PNG. I'm going to import that. And again, it puts it right there in my layer. I can grab it, I can manipulate it, I can move it wherever I want to. Say I want to throw it there. I can move it to the front, or I can put it to the back, or I can put it maybe in between my text. If I want to put it under the text, but in front of that back layer, I can do that too. So if you have a logo, you can import that in. Now, one thing you notice on this logo, this Nike logo, is that it comes out, cut out as the Nike logo, and I'll show you the difference between that. If I've got two Nike logos in here, here's a JPEG, and I import that. That one has the background on it. So, and there's ways to manipulate that and get rid of that. But that's a difference between certain different types of files. That's a JPEG file. Usually JPEG files are what we call bitmap files, and they're combined with the background. So typically, if I want to get rid of that background, I have to go through some more steps in Premiere to get rid of it. Logo is a PNG file. PNG files are typically higher quality files, and they come a lot of times with the background already removed. it just kind of depends on what the file is. Let me clear this. And if you notice, if I go back into my desktop here, and I'll just click on this, if I bring up that PNG file, it's got kind of that gray background. This is the actual background on the file. So you just have to kind of play around and import it in and see if that background will drop out. There's also other ways. There's what we call alpha channels. I don't know if you've encountered that. Some files will have an alpha channel on that, and that alpha channel just means that it will take out that back and forth between Premiere and Photoshop really easily, which is really nice because you can really control it if you know Photoshop. And again, if you want to make a career out of editing, or you're going to be doing this, I would encourage you to take a Photoshop class, because I use it all the time. When I'm editing, I'm usually spending a good 10-15% of the total time going back and forth between Photoshops, because you're always going to get logos like this, and if I got this logo, I'd probably want to go in, take it into Photoshop, create it into, change it into a vector format, and then use it. Now, hopefully the client will give me a vector format, give me a nice Photoshop file or a vector format to begin with, and that would help. Now, there is another program, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called Adobe Illustrator, and that is a vector format manipulation. You can manipulate vector files in Photoshop, but Adobe Illustrator is actually the more proper program for creating that, those vector files. So that's another program if you really want to go crazy and get to know. But I would do Photoshop first, because again, that's it's very useful for using in Premiere. Okay, any questions on that? All right. Good, well, we're moving through this. I thought this would take a lot longer, but we're moving through this pretty quickly. Last thing I want to do is show you this is just basic animation on all this stuff. And when you learn the basic animation, we can add animation, we can add keyframes to these, and we can manipulate these however you want to. And that's nice, because then we can start to add animation and give this a little bit more interest. So what I'm going to do, let me get rid of this Nike logo here. Just go ahead and clear that. Obviously, if you right-click on this, you've also got other options up here. You can go in here, you can duplicate, you can create a group out of these, and I've never done that, so I don't know what the difference. I'm not sure what the advantages is on that, but we'll just go in here and clear this. So again, if I click off of this, I've got one file that I can manipulate, but if I want to go in and create a little animation, I can click on each one of these different areas and animate them. Let me go. And animate them with the video. So if I've got this video, and I just selected this thing of bread, let's say as this is playing, this is our opening title. And again, we can just cut to that. We can add any of our transitions to bring this up. If you want to dissolve, again, just right click on the lead edge, and you can say apply default, which is dissolve. I can pull that out, and now I've got a dissolve on that. I can go over here to my effects panel, to my transitions, and let's say I want to add, I want to slide it in. So I'll just come down here to slide. I'm going to select that. I'm going to drop it on the edge, and now I can slide it in. So you can use your, your basic effects panel to create a little bit of animation. Now, obviously, that's not going to animate the individual part of it, but it will animate the whole thing all together. And again, we've got these, when you, as we talked about in transitions, when you bring that up, you've got a control window here, and I can control where I want to send that animation, if I want to bring it from the right side, or if I want to bring it from the corner. You know, you've got all those controls there. And you can go through and, you know, put whatever you want to on this and play around with it and see what looks good. You know, and that obviously doesn't look good at all, so. But the other way, let me get rid of that. The other way we can do this is we can animate using our effects controls up here, because we've got full access to all these effects controls to animate this however we want. Now, one way we can do this is we can come in here to the overall motion. Now, notice you've got differences here. You've got the vector motion. You've got the motion on each one of the individual text and background. And if I click on this here, notice it, you know, it highlights over here, so it keeps track of that over there. Or we've got motion on the whole thing, the whole object completely, which we can just click this motion and we can manipulate this over here, and we can create keyframes for the motion over here. So the easiest thing, I'll start by showing you motion on just the entire object. If we want to create this and maybe, you know, slide it in from the top and scale it as we slide it. What you want to do is always want to start with graphics when you're creating, especially if you're creating a complicated this is just basic animation on all this stuff. And when you learn the basic animation, we can add keyframes to these, and we can manipulate these however you want to. And that's nice, because then we can start to add animation and give this a little bit more interest. So what I'm going to do, let me get rid of this Nike logo here. Just go ahead and clear that. Obviously, if you right-click on this, you've also got other options up here. You can go in here, you can duplicate, you can create a group out of these, and I've never done that, so I don't know what the difference. I'm not sure what the advantages is on that, but we'll just go in here and clear this. So again, if I click off of this, I've got one file that I can manipulate, but if I want to go in and create a little animation, I can click on each one of these different areas and animate them. Let me go. And animate them with the video. So if I've got this video, and I just selected this thing of bread. Let's say as this is playing, this is our opening title. And again, we can just cut to that. We can add any of our transitions to bring this up. If you want to dissolve, again, just right click on the lead edge, and you can say apply default, which is dissolve. I can pull that out, and now I've got a dissolve on that. I can go over here to my effects panel, to my transitions, and let's say I want to add, I want to slide it in. So I'll just come down here to slide. I'm going to select that. I'm going to drop it on the edge, and now I can slide it in. So you can use your, your basic effects panel to create a little bit of animation. Now, obviously, that's not going to animate the individual part of it, but it will animate the whole thing all together. And again, we've got these when you, as we talked about in transitions, when you bring that up, you've got a control window here, and I can control where I want to send that animation, if I want to bring it from the right side, or if I want to bring it from the corner. You know, you've got all those controls there. And you can go through and, you know, put whatever you want to on this and play around with it and see what looks good. You know, and that obviously doesn't look good at all. So, but the other way, the other way we can do this is we can animate using our effects controls up here, because we've got full access to all these effects controls to animate this however we want. Now, one way we can do this is we can come in here to the overall motion. Now, notice you've got differences here. You've got the vector motion. You've got the motion on each one of the individual text and background. And if I click on this here, notice it, you know, it highlights over here, so it keeps track of that over there. Or we've got motion on the whole thing, the whole object completely, which we can just click this motion and we can manipulate this over here, and we can create keyframes for the motion over here. So the easiest thing, I'll start by showing you motion on just the entire object. If we want to create this and maybe, you know, slide it in from the top and scale it as we slide it. What you want to do is always want to start with graphics when you're creating, especially if you're creating a complicated motion and bring it together. Always go to the end of it. So let's just say I'll pick a point here, and remember, we can always move these points, but I'm going to pick a point here in the middle, and that's going to be my position, and that's going to be my scale. So that's where the graphic's going to end up. Then I back up to the beginning where I want it to start from, and now I can just come up here to motion, and I can just click and drag this. Let's say I'm going to drag it off here, and again, there's my keyframe for the opening, which is off. And if you actually want to see where that is, you can, we haven't talked about this a whole lot, but you can actually change the dimension on your screen here. If I go down to like 10% of the screen, I can actually now see where that thing is floating off here, off the screen. So you do have that option. Typically we just leave that. So I've got it back there, and all I have to do now is hit my animation, and boom, it moves into place. Very simple. If I want to scale as I do that, again, I go to this is where I'm going to end up at. If I want to line up at the exact same spot, I'm going to click this arrow here. That'll take me back to my beginning position. And then I'm going to set the scale at, let's say 20%. So I'm going to scale it down. And now I'll hit play again. And this time, it scales up as it moves into position. So again, that's pretty basic. If you want to increase or decrease the speed, all you would do is move these keyframes closer together or farther apart, and that's going to speed the whole thing up or slow it down. So, is that clear? Anybody got any questions on that? Pretty straightforward, not too difficult. Again, you can rotate it. Let's show this with rotation. So again, if I want to go back, I go back to my ending position where I want everything to be, and I'll click rotation and set it so that I know when it gets in place, it's going to be properly rotated. And then we go back to the beginning, and let's just say we want to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'd hit 90 degrees at the beginning, hit my playback button, and There, we rotate in. Let's say that's too fast. I want to slow it down a bit. I'm just going to spread those out. And it rotates in. And again, now we can put, now the other thing you can do is you can put an effect on this. So let's back this up. I'm going to slow this down, take all these effects to the beginning of the clip, and then I'm going to drop an effect. I'm just going to drop my dissolve. So now it's going to be dissolving over that animation. So now it dissolves up and animates in and goes into position. Okay? The other thing that we talked about a little bit, I don't know if you remember this, it's sometimes nice on these graphics to add in, you've got controls on these graphics, and I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on this, but the nice thing down here, you've got ease in and ease out. So as it comes in, you can give it an ease in on the scale, and we'll probably we'll also do that on the position. We can give it an ease in on the position. That's just going to slow it down so it just doesn't come in, boom, and stop. This gives it a little bit of motion, a little ease in. So I don't know if you can see that, and you can play around with it. You've got options to do that, but that just also helps on that file. So now, the final thing is manipulate the whole file as one. But let's say we want to manipulate individual areas of this file. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete all these, so I'm back to 0. Let's say we want to bring, sourdough bread from one direction, 101 from another direction, the box from another direction, and we all want to meet in the middle. Again, it's real simple to do. You can create motion. But now we go up to this other menu. Instead of using the motion menu that we were just using, which is right down here, and again, you've got opacity on that if you want to play around with opacity. We go up here to our vector motion, which is the graphics, and we create the same thing up here. So again, what we want to do is and when we open that up, we've got a lot of things going on here, so I'm going to try and close this down. You can go in again and you can manipulate things with the text and change it. But all I want to do is manipulate the motion. So again, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to give it let me get rid of this dissolve too. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to give it an ending, and this has already got a keyframe in here. Let's see what's in here. This has already got a key, the anchor point, so we can just take that out. I'm going to start with this text 101, and I'm going to again assign it the position where I want it to end. So I'm going to click on position, I'm going to click on scale, and then I'll back up to the first part of the animation where I want it to start, and then I'll move that. And again, I want this just to come straight up from the bottom. Didn't want to do that. I'm going to go to the bottom here. So I'm going to move that down to the bottom, and that's its starting position. So again, now we're just animating individual portions. That's kind of slow. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So if I want to bring sourdough bread from a different direction, then again, I'm just going to click on sourdough bread. I'm going to take the transform tool down. Again, I've got to go to the end position. And if you want these to match exactly, again, you want to use these little arrows here, right there, to go to where you set up that position on your 101. I want to set up the same position on my next text. So again, I'll just click position, I'll click scale. Then if I want to go to the exact place where that animation starts, again, I go back up to the 101, and I click to its starting position, so it's now at the starting position, and then I want to position my sourdough bread at its starting position, which let's just say is, you know, over to the left here. So it's just off screen there. All right, so it's positioned there, and you can see what I'm doing here. We're just going to go down here. We're going to do the same thing with our brown box. We're going to jump to the end here, final position where I want this to end up, and I'm going to go down here to transform position, and I'm going to move this one now to the right. I'm going to slide it off. Oh, actually, I did the wrong thing there. Let me reset. What I forgot to do is click on my opening position. Again, when you're creating these things, you do this all the time. You make silly mistakes like that. So there's my ending position. And again, I'll go back to my opening position. And now I will move it off to the right. Again, I'm just hovering over this and moving it to the right. And I can scrub through this. But basically now when I hit play, everything comes together and it all hits the same point. Again, I can put in those ease in cues. I could go in and individually ease in each one of those, but I've got control over every part, every little detail, every layer of the actual graphic. So does that all make sense? Very simple to do, very powerful. You can get really, really creative with this stuff and do some nice things. And again, once you do that, once you're get this creativity or get this object assembled the way you want it, then you can save it as that MOGRT file that we talked about earlier, and you have it if you want to drop it in and create other graphics that are like this. Obviously, if we're in the one project and we've got this created and we want to you know, copy paste it, it's really easy just to copy, paste, and I could go in here and I could change the title on this. Maybe I've got a reoccurring title that comes up 4 or 5 times in the video and I want to repeat the same thing. Or maybe I want to cut, you know, I could change the colored background. So I could keep the same movement, change the background, change all the wording in there, and just bring it back in. So, does that make sense? Any questions?
Can you save it if you want to save it as a MOGRT file?
Yeah, I don't want to get into that today because it's kind of complicated. So we'll pick that up. I just don't want to throw too many things at it. There's a tutorial, like I said, there's a tutorial in there. If you want to go in and take a look at that, you can. Basically that's about it. And we went through that. I thought that would take a lot longer to cover all this stuff. So, and no questions on this or anybody? Yeah, John?
Slightly different, but remember I had asked you about how to take a video and make it into a still.
Yeah, good point. I wanted to cover that today. John brought up a really good point, and this kind of goes along with graphics, and that is creating stills out of your graphics, and it's really important. There's a couple different ways to do this, but let's say, I'm going to get rid of this file. Let's say when this bread comes up and hits right there at that point, and we can tell where that is. We just come up here, we can position our cursor. Let's say at that point we want to freeze the background video at that point. There's several different ways to do that. One way is, and I never pointed this out to you on the controls when we were first talking about this, you have a little control down here which is called export frame. And all that does is it grabs a freeze frame of that portion of the video and exports it as a frame. So if I position this right where I want it to stop, I can just click on that export frame. I can bring it up. It's going to ask me to title the frame. It gives me a default title right there. It's going to ask you what type of file, and it defaults to this DPX, which I don't even know what a DPX file is, to be honest. I would change it, probably go with the PNG. PNG is a high quality file. It's either that or JPEG. But PNG, it'll ask you where you want to place it. So whatever file you're working in, and let's see, I'm in RTD16, I'm in here. So I can drop it, and even in graphics, I can put it in my graphics folder to keep it organized. It'll ask you if you want to import that file, and if you click on that, it will put it into your project. So I'll say yes. So I'll click OK on that, and if I go back to my project file now, project down here, it's got it highlighted right there. It's also placed a copy of it wherever I asked it to place it. So now I can pull this up and I can put it on the timeline and I can place it right there. Again, I want to use my snap tool. Notice my snap tool is off here. So either select that or hit hotkey as S. And then I can snap that right to that my playhead indicator. And now I get a freeze frame. As that comes in and everything hits, boom, and it's freeze frame. So does that make sense? Really easy way to do it. A lot of times you want to, again, if you're using Photoshop especially, if we want to capture that piece of bread and do some manipulation with it, maybe we want to outline it or add color to it, do something, we can take that freeze frame out into Photoshop, manipulate it any way we want to, bring it back in, and then it's in perfect, it's matched perfectly. So as long as we don't change the dimensions of it, it'll match perfectly with the video. So you can do a lot of nice effects with that. There's another way to do kind of the same thing, and it's a little bit easier way if you don't want to actually export the frame and create a separate frame. And that's just putting a hold on the video. So again, I'll come up here, I'll find the spot where I want to hold. And if I right click on my track, my video track, I'm going to bring up two options down here. I've got frame hold options and add frame hold. So this is the easy way to do it. I just click on add frame hold, and it'll create actually a separate file now on my track, which again is a freeze frame. So again, same thing, just come up here and it'll hold. Now once you've got the frame hold created, you've got options. Or actually let's go back, take that back. Let's go back to a video. Another way to do this is a third way. Again, let me go back and find that exact position where they're stopping. I'll just click through and get my final position where I want my freeze frame to be. Another way we could do is just cut this into a separate piece of video. So I could place a cut right there. And then I can go back in and go to my frame hold options. And now I've got options to where to place that hold. And one of those options is the endpoint of my video. So I could select a specific time code. I could select the output of the video, which I wouldn't want to do. I could select the playhead, where the playhead is located. But I just want to select the endpoint because I've created this new piece of video. And if I select the endpoint, again, I'm doing the same thing, the exact same thing. It's just a different way of manipulating it. And boom, I've got a freeze frame. So that's a few different ways to create your freeze frame. Freeze frames are really important. And I should have showed you that earlier because a lot of times you just want to obviously freeze. But let's go over that real quick too. And again, very, very simple option for if we want to slow down video or speed it up. You just right click, click on this speed duration, and you just tell it, you know, if you want that video to be half the amount of time, just put it in a 50% speed, hit OK. Actually, that's twice the amount of time. I'm slowing it down, so 50% is actually stretching it. If you want it to be half the time, you'd just put in
You're talking about the freeze frame, right?
200. Pardon?
Just talking about the length of the freeze frame, how long we see it. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, you can do that also. Yeah. So if I make it 200%, then you know, I'm speeding it up, making it twice as fast. So now it just goes a little faster. I've taken the freeze frame off at that point, but or I can, you know, you can slow it down. One other tip on this is you can also reverse the speed here, which is kind of a cool effect. Sometimes you need to reverse video. So I can reverse it. I'm just going to change this back to 100%, go back to normal speed, but I'm going to reverse the video. It just plays it in the opposite direction, and maybe you want to do that. And again, you can put a speed on that, speed it up, slow it down, but now we're going in the opposite direction. One tip and trick for this is you've got a selector down here that shows what type of what type of time interpolation, which just means how they're rendering out this file. I would normally go down to this optical flow, and I don't know anything about the reason for this. Everybody, any blog I go on to, they say, oh, I just choose optical flow. Optical flow is just a little bit higher quality. So, you know, if you think about it when you're doing it, I would select that optical flow. To be honest, when I look at it myself, I don't see a whole lot of difference. Now notice when I do that, this timeline indicator up here all of a sudden turns red, which means it's the computer's working a little bit harder to play this in real time, so it might stutter on you. And whenever you get a red bar up here, it just means that if you really want to see this like it's going to be presented, you should render it out. We haven't really talked about that, but let me go into that too. Yeah,
What
go
about
ahead.
the red triangle? I got a red triangle on mine.
Where did you get the red triangle at?
You know, it's working and it's right there at the bottom. You like to snack this in the bottom of the corner right there.
Do you have it right now?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Let me take a look at it. I don't know. Real time, it should be fine. And rendering, if we haven't talked about that, all you're doing is creating, the computer's literally creating a second file with the rendered file, and the computer knows when it hits this point, let's say if I've got, you know, a bunch of edits in here, but then I've got a big render right in the middle of it, it knows when it hits that point, instead of playing back these two files, it's going to go to that third rendered file, and it's just going to play that back instead. So it'll play it back, you know, normal speed, and it won't stutter with it. So does that make sense? The other thing that I talked about at the beginning that helps with these files, and what I'm going to do is, let me go in here. Actually, let me copy paste this. Just in case, I'm going to keep that animation. I'm going to take one of these files and take all this animation off. You've got, take the animation off on this. One other way to help out is you've got up here in the wrench tool, you've got this snap in program monitor. If you turn that on, sometimes people like snap, sometimes they don't. It can be kind of annoying. But sometimes when I'm creating it, I'll turn that on. What I'm also going to turn on is my rulers, and I'm going to turn my guide back on. So if I got my guides turned back on, let's get rid of this one, And let's say I move that guide over there. Now, when I take this sourdough bread, I can take it and notice it's snapping right there, and it gives me this little red indicator. I don't know if you can see that, but it'll snap to a guide. It'll snap to the middle position in the frame. Notice, and it'll give you, again, if you can see that, I don't know if that, yeah, it stays on release. So there's a red indicator here running up and down. That just means that you snapped to the middle of the picture. Again, like I said, if I'm creating this guide and I want to put a bunch of text and I want to position them exactly, all these texts now will position right exactly with that guide. Let's say I want to manipulate this thing, this box, and I want to pull that down. But I want to, again, I want to snap that box exactly so it's lined up perfectly there. Again, you can do that. So that's just another tool that you've got in here to use. And sometimes you want to turn that on, sometimes you want to turn it off. So,
Quick question. Can you are you able to put the sourdough bread part over the 101? Can you like put them over the top of it? Like if I wanted to make, say, the 101 larger,
yeah,
and I put the sourdough thing over the top of the 101.
Sure.
Would that just simply move it over? Or do
Oh
I
yeah.
do it? Okay.
Yeah, you could do that. Brian was just saying he wants to take the sourdough bread and put it over the top of the 101. I mean, yeah, again, you can manipulate this, however you want to.
If you just enlarge the 101, yeah, and then
Yeah, again, it's just moving your layers up here in the right-hand corner. I'm just going to pull that 101, if I want to put it underneath, something like that, whatever you want to do. I can then go in there and maybe, take the transparency down so it shows through behind it, whatever you want to do. And I've got my keyframes turned on, so it's actually remembering what I'm doing here. So, get rid of those. But I still got the keyframe turned on there. But again, that's the most powerful thing here is that layer tool, rearranging those layers. And you can see if you've got 5 or 6 layers, you can do all sorts of depth. You can put transparencies on each layer. You can manipulate each layer, rotate it, give it animation. So, and that's basically how people are creating those MOGRT files. And obviously, if you take that into After Effects, you've even got all sorts of other animation that you can create in that. So, but anyway, that's basically it on basic introduction to titles. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, Hunter.
I have to ask, I noticed that when I'm playing the video, my text loses resolution. Is that the text scaling to the native resolution?
Okay, that's a good point. And and we may not have talked about this in class. Look on your little indicator down here. Do you see what I'm pointing at, Hunter?
Yes.
What's that set to?
That's 1/2.
Okay, so you've got an indicator here, and this may be addressing what you're talking about. And if you drop that menu down, you see I've got a lot of different options to choose there. You're just telling the computer what resolution you want playback in. So if I go to full resolution, that's going to make the computer work harder, and maybe it's going to stutter a little bit. Let's see if I can play back this animation at full. Did you see that? It did a little, it stopped there in the animation. It took just a slight hit when it was coming in. I don't know if you can see that. So what you do, that obviously gives you the full animation. You can see what your picture looks like exactly. But if you want to reduce reduce the resolution playback, you can go down to 1/2, Now it's gonna play back, it should play back better in sync, but it's not giving you the full resolution, and it's sometimes hard to see. Let's see if we can go full screen. It slightly blurs the picture a little bit when it does this because it loses a little animation. So if I play this back, and it's still stuttering a little bit. Notice, now you can't see. Let me go back here. Go full screen. Okay, I'm going to play this back. Did you see when I hit the freeze frame how that text looks a lot sharper? Watch it one more time. Here, let me see if I can. Watch it as the text comes in, it animates in and hits. It's going to go from being slightly blurred to really sharp. Boom. You see the transition? That's the difference in playback. Now if I play back that in full resolution, you shouldn't be able to see that. But when I'm playing back full resolution, it may stutter even more. So my text comes in, hits, I go to a freeze frame, and there's no change in the background resolution. Did you see that? So again, if you're playing at full speed, full resolution, the computer may be chugging a little bit to try and recreate, keep up. So if that's happening a lot, all you want to do, you can switch down to 1/2 resolution, or if you're having troubles, you can go down to 1/4 resolution. And again, the playback on that is not going to look the greatest, but when you go to a freeze frame like this, then it goes to full resolution. So again, watch. So there's 1/4 resolution, and then I hit a freeze frame and it pops the regular. So that might be, again, that's just a little tool to help you on playback. If you're having trouble, you can run it down at a 1/4 resolution. And a lot of times it's scary because you turn on, 1/4 resolution, you're doing editing, you forget you turned it on, and you're looking at a shot that you shot personally, and you're seeing the playing back, and it's like, oh man, that's out of focus. We shot that out of focus. And then you hit the freeze frame, and then boom, it jumps back into full focus. So just, something to be aware of. Any other questions on that or on that? Okay, so like I said, we went through this. I thought this was going to take a couple hours to get through, and we went through it pretty quickly. You guys don't have any questions? So let's take a break. Meet back.